Data drives your business, and every business. Whether you're using it to build your executive strategy or crunching the numbers to mitigate risk and ensure compliance, you need to do more with your data and get more from your data. Our solutions give you better access to more information, access to data that's big and diverse, internal and external, structured and unstructured, static and streaming. This allows you to maximize its value by making it all usable and repeatable. Your analysts and executives need analytics they can trust. And with a secure, unified data marketplace, you can ensure data integrity, data lineage, and better control, so everyone can work together with creativity and confidence to generate greater insight, accountability, and results for you and your organization. That's data intelligence.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Again, welcome to our next session. I hope you guys had some quick takeaways and positives to take away from Harry's session. Now you are in Harrison and Murphy's session. So Harrison Murphy, yeah, not Harry. So it's a different Harry. This is Harry with the sun. So Harrison. Okay. So yeah, we just wait for a few seconds for more attendees to log into the session. I see the numbers quickly going up. And meanwhile, I would like to introduce Harrison Murphy, who is the director for AIM America Solutions Specialist for Data Analytics Altair, United States. So he is tuning in. He's tuning in all the way from United States, and it's an amazing thing that it's like he's in the past. I believe it's 23rd of September, right? And it's a nighttime. It's like a sleeping time, and hopefully Harrison does not show up in his pajamas. Harrison, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our audience.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and yeah, hopefully you don't see me in my bottom half pajamas on, but yeah, I'm fully dressed and ready to go.
Okay. Yeah, you can turn your video on so that people can see you. All right. Oh, you look like Captain America.
No, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, I've never heard that. I made my night.
Okay, with that, I pass the mic on to you. I'm going to turn my video on, and everyone enjoy this session, yeah?
All right, perfect. Thanks so much. And good morning again, everyone. As I was introduced, I'm Harry, one of the directors for our solutions specialists for the American team here at the Data Analytics Division of Altair. And today what we're going to be going through is working with our semi-structured or more non-structured or non-tabular data sources and how we can work with multiple different data sources to get them compiled together and create efficiencies in some of your processes. The way we're going to be doing this is taking you through some quick introductory slides just to set the stage, get a good understanding of some of the trends, some of the background as to why we do things the way that we do and where it can fit within the greater scope of your business processes and a lot of the trends that we see inside of these processes and the organizations as a whole. From there, we'll be taking you through the demonstration of the software live just to show you how the software actually works and then loop those back into the trends and some of the different points that we hit when we set the scene with the slides to begin with. So we'll jump right into it here and give you an idea of really the framework or the environment in which we're working in. Because when we're talking about unlocking our difficult to work data sets, we can really talk about it in two different ways. One is the defensive side of things, the things that we need to get done on a day-to-day basis. And the other side is the offensive side. What this data allows us to do that we didn't have from before. And we can achieve both those objectives at the same time with a number of these different constraints, some of these different things that are imposed upon us. Well, let's talk about some of the environments in which we're working in. Because every process that we're doing isn't an isolated event. It isn't confined merely to our own, day-to-day processes. There tends to be a type of what we like to refer to as a data journey, starting from accessing, preparing, and understanding our data, and then eventually using that data to make some predictions or even achieve or get some insight into what it's actually telling us. This is where the progress from defensive sides of our data analytics into more of the offensive side. How do we take our data that we need to have done every day for audit purposes, for reconciliation purposes, just for reporting purposes, and how do we take that and get it to work for us? And how do we do this with the constrained environments that we might be working in? Because eventually we want to be able to enable our organization to do more with the data that we're really using on a day-to-day basis, rather than seeing it as a hindrance, rather than seeing it as a burden. Let's also use it as a way to gain insight, to gain leverage, and to make better decisions going forward. So we see that as the data journey, and it really all starts with accessing and preparing that data set. We really can't make accurate, insightful analytical decisions off the data if we don't have access to all of it to begin with. We see people jumping into some of the later steps in that data journey without really accessing or leveraging all of the data they have available, because most of that data may not have been in the correct format or work appropriately with other pieces of the data that they're using. And we want to really level set that playing field, give you access to all of that data, make your processes more efficient, at the same time adding a layer of governance and trust into that data, while still allowing you to prepare it in a quickly and timely fashion. And we'll be touching on all of those different pieces here. So really, how do we do that? Well, it really starts with acquiring that data set. And we want to be able to leverage all those different data sets that you might have, not just the ones that work well together, not the ones that are already in a structured, ready to go compliant format. We want to really have access to all of that data, regardless of the format it's in, regardless of the source. And we have a couple ways that we can do that leveraging our tool, whether we're connecting directly into the source of that data itself and creating that pipeline to extract the data, pull it into our software, and begin to transform and manipulate it, or through local files, or really building out what we call models, which are going to be a way that we can normalize and compare multiple different disparate data sets together, regardless of their original formats. We'll take you through what that looks like today in a reconciliation use case. Now, once all that data is pulled into our software here, we're going to have the ability to create the comparisons between all of our different formats and all the different sources that we're using. And once it's there, we want to be able to manipulate. We want to be able to get some of that insight. We want to be able to push the processes that we're doing upstream a little bit. Meaning we want to be able to take care of most of these follow-on steps before they get to those next the people that are passing on that data baton. We want to be able to do it in a governed and a curated environment, so that we add a layer of trust on top of that data. And we do that by building out these repeatable processes and these repeatable workspaces, which are going to continually be able to be leveraged to feed our new data sets through, adjust and change with the variabilities and with the discrepancies that might exist inside of each one of those reports, and give you consistent and reliable, trusted results as an outcome. Because we know that there's a number of different people that are part of this organization, or that are part of the flow of that data. No one works in a vacuum, and no one does any of their processes in a vacuum. It tends to be pushed to the next layer or the next level, or to innovate a little bit further and take the data that you're already doing on a day-to-day basis and make it work for you, rather than seeing it as that burden, rather than seeing it as that obstacle to overcome. And there's a lot of different implications that come with that, from just accessing that data to making sure that accurate and predicted data sets have a layer of data quality and that data trust imposed upon them before it goes to another persona, before it goes to that decision maker, before it goes to that data scientist, or whomever that data is going to downstream. And doing all of this while still completing our day-to-day tasks, and still completing what I like to refer as those defensive tasks, the things that we need to do to stay out of trouble, to stay in compliance. We can still do those and meet those objectives at the same time. We want to find that balance between agility and governance, making sure people have access to the data sets they need to have access to, but doing it in a controlled and trusted environment. So with that in mind, and kind of with the stage set, we'll show you how we start to meet some of those objectives using our tool Monarch, which is going to have that ability to extract and pull in those semi-structured as well as those structured data sets, create a repeatable and reusable template to go ahead and pass the new data through it and get your consistent, reliable results, and to be pushed downstream for further either analysis, for historic records, or even for visualization, or even making some predictive prescriptive models somewhere down the line, really putting your data to work for you. So what I'll do here is go ahead and start sharing my screen. And what we have now is our Monarch tool. It's a desktop-based tool that's going to have that ability to go ahead and extract the data out of those semi-structured document sources, and we'll give you an idea of what that looks like here. But to further elaborate on the different types of data sets that we're going to be able to pull in, if we hit that open data button in the middle, we can see the wide variety of the different ways that we can do that. So whether they're local files, those PDFs, those text reports, the things that we see as semi-structured or don't have that rigid tabular structure that don't quite work well with any other data source, mainly because they're built for humans to be read. They're built for someone to look at or to translate into some other tabular format. We can take those and then convert them into a tabular structure to then be combined with other tools. Because the data extraction, the acquisition of the data is only a very small portion of a lot of these processes. The integration of additional data sources and the collaboration between the two are also an integral part of completing these daily, these monthly, these weekly tasks. So we also have that ability to pull in not only those semi-structured sources, but the structured ones as well. Our Microsoft Excels, leveraging any applications or databases that we have, whether they're named applications like we have here or unnamed, we want to be able to leverage all of those different data sources, regardless of what systems you might be using or where that original data set really lives. A number of different applications, big data sources, information even pulled directly from websites in a tabular structure. The idea behind all of this is anything you see from this list can be combined with, joined with, blended with, compared to, contrasted from anything else from this list. And we want to go ahead and create that repeatable, reusable template so we can simply pass new data sets in through our workspace that we've created, and then simply get those same results on a consistent and reliable basis. So what does this actually look like? So today we're going to be using is a very simple and a very straightforward, but a very nuanced, I guess, process as far as how we're able to extract that data, and it is that reconciliation use case. So if we have any type of AR aging report that comes to us in a type of structured format, or in type of a tabular or non-tabular structured format, more of in a hierarchical format, we want to go ahead and extract the data from these types of reports and pull them into Monarch in order to get some better ideas as to which items we're going to link with. What are some of the trends inside of our data sets? What are some of the variables in here that we might want to go ahead and further analyze? Because we as a human have the ability to look at these reports and understand them immediately, but it might not be so easy for a machine to do. So whether it's something in a PDF or something in a text report generated by some core system, or anything else that you might have that's semi-structured like this, in our case, a general ledger account, we want to be able to go ahead and extract this data in a consistent and reliable fashion. Because efficiency isn't the only thing we're looking for. We're also looking for accuracy and trust within our data, so we don't need to go back and verify the content over and over again. So our idea here is we want to go ahead and take that, convert it into a tabular structure, and then compare it to something else that might be external to our process today. So all we need to do is take an example of one of those reports and drop it inside of our tool here, and it's going to go ahead and open up what we call this report design. This report design is where we turn that semi-structured document source into something with structure. And we do this through 3 different steps. First, we generate templates, which are relationships between the data inside of this report. We do this with traps, identifying the patterns of the content inside of this report itself. And then we also do this with fields, and the fields actually create the columns. And regardless of kind of what these reports look like, the patterns inside of them, we have a very sophisticated way to find those patterns as specific or as general as they might be. Now, in the past, we really had to do a lot of this by hand. We had to go ahead and identify what our different templates were, define our relationships, define our traps, the patterns, the content inside of here. And we still absolutely have that ability to, in depth and with a fine-tooth comb, go in here and extract all of the data that we want. But we also have created some tools here to facilitate this process in a much faster fashion. By simply auto-defining this report, we're going to be able to find a number of these different patterns and a number of the different types of hierarchical structures built inside these reports in order to intuitively get a structured table as a result. So at the bottom of our screen, we see the result of what this table might actually look like if it was flattened out, or if we even had an analyst go in here and translate the content that they saw within this report into a structured format. Now, because we're looking for patterns, because we're looking for the relationships between the data, we've now created an entirely repeatable fashion, or an entirely repeatable format. Because inside of this process, we're simply looking for the patterns within this report, not the specifics. Meaning, even though this report or the content inside of it might change week to week or month to month, or based off the accounts or anything else that we're comparing it to, we're simply looking for the patterns that a human would intuitively be able to understand and define, and translating that into a language that Monarch can understand. And like I had mentioned from before, it's not enough to simply capture it quickly. We also want to capture it accurately. We have the ability to verify the content inside of here to make sure that there are no additional anomalies. There's nothing inside this report that might be expanding outside of our purview, or any values that we might be cutting off, or any items that aren't coming in accordingly as they should. So for instance, if there were letters inside of our data sets that should be treated as numerics, if we're leaving out any values, or we're finding any things that maybe don't follow the set instructions that we built out for them initially, we can go ahead and verify this content to begin with, and it kind of acts as our spell check here. So this adds not only that efficiency for the operational side of things, but we also have built in a layer of trust, because we don't need to worry about a human coming in here and building out something that is going to be variable or susceptible to change or to errors in here. We're simply building out a pattern that's going to be repeatable. And once we do this, we can go ahead and accept everything that we've built and go ahead and load it into a platform that's now going to normalize all of that data and bring it into a place where we can now compare it to any other data sources that we want to integrate inside of this process. So once that data is extracted, once we're satisfied with how it's being pulled out in this accurate fashion, we load it inside of what we call this Data Prep Studio. And that Data Prep Studio is going to give us the ability to now normalize and transform that data in any other fashion that we see fit. Meaning, when we're dealing with multiple disparate data sources as a whole within a process, we want to compare this to something external, such as an Excel, such as a homegrown database, or an Oracle database, SAP, any number of these other vendors. We need to have a platform to make sure that what we're pulling out of one system is able to talk to any other. And that's what we saw at the beginning with all of the data sources that we can go ahead and extract. But we might want to go ahead and take this a step further and begin to cleanse the data set to prepare it a little bit further. So we can take any one of these columns that we've now brought in and begin to manipulate, begin to transform it, change our period ending date, instead of coming in as a string category to actually come in as a datetime category. Right click on any one of these columns, which brings down a simplified drop-down menu of some of these functions and features built directly into the tool to perform some of these complex changes right out of the box. Whether we needed to change the format here, we can do that, make it our long date, just so we have a little bit more insight as to when these reports are actually ran. Maybe we can find some patterns as to when vendors tend to be paying off any of their accounts, if it's a weekday, if it's a weekend, if it tends to be month end. We can start to get a little bit more insight inside of our data once we flattened it out and brought it into the structured format. Now, if you notice, any changes that I make to this data set once it's pulled in is now recorded on the right side of our screen inside of what we call that change history. So simply moving columns, renaming them, applying calculated fields, building in conditional statements inside of our workspaces, we can make these fairly complex. And we're not only going to remember how the data was extracted initially, we're also going to remember all these subsequent steps that we're taking to cleanse and verify the content of that data as well. And we see all that recorded here. So this is where we're able to add that lineage, that audit power, that repeatability into all of this, and get a good understanding of exactly how that data came in by simply turning on or turning off these changes. We can verify this workspace once, see the results, trust that they're there, and then trust the content that's being passed to this workspace. So we're really building out not only a simplified process, but one that instills us with a little bit more confidence in our processes going forward as well. Now, we know that this isn't the end all be all. This isn't the end state of all this. We might want to compare it to something else. So if I have any other additional data source, whether that's Excel, a database, a live connection, something that is pulled in from an application, we can load these in as well. And we can see toggling back and forth between these two. And I just pulled in an Access database for the sake of simplicity. If we compare the two data sets that we pulled into the workspace, they're going to look relatively similar. Because again, once that data is loaded up inside of Monarch, it doesn't really matter where that data came from, what it originally looks like. And this really gives us a way to normalize, identify those trends, identify the content inside of here, and make the adjustments that we need. So if we want to summarize all of this data sets, not only are we going to change the actual column level operations, we can actually transform the entire data set itself. whether we're sorting, pivoting, unpivoting. In our case, we want to group on certain values in here. So grouping on our company and getting a more condensed, more summarized look at all of our data in a singular location, we can do all of that while still maintaining the lineage, while still maintaining our audit trail, exactly how we got here, and even saving individual sets of changes that we can apply at a later date. If I need to cleanse my data set here to make it look like anything else that we pulled into our workspace, I can save individual change list histories and simply bring these into Monarch as well, so that I can make my process a bit more efficient while still not losing that governance, while still not losing that variability or losing any of the content inside of here, and making that process, again, just a bit more trusted. Now we can simply compare apples to oranges now because they're speaking the same language. Bringing in two separate data sets from two different locations, doing a either simplified join, doing a lookup, or even a combinations of the two. What we want to be able to achieve here is pushing the ability for an end user to apply more complex changes further upstream. So we can really build out entire processes contained inside of a singular workspace. So by the time the data comes out of this process, and we want to perform either analytics or we want to visualize the data, the people that are really driving those types of decisions, it's not incumbent upon them to cleanse that data set. So in our case, I want to find the discrepancies. I don't want to make just comparisons between these. I want to find the mismatches. I want to find the things that have been updated since the last time this report was ran compared to that database that we're pulling in, if I'm looking at historic data. In our case, we can either do the standard joins, lookup joins, negative joins, and we can go ahead and interact with our data and play with it to make sure that we're getting accurate content pulled out from it. So in our case, we want to go ahead and perform that negative join, identify the items that have been pulled in from our PDF report that aren't inside of our database, find out where we have those discrepancies, maybe push those downstream for a bit more analytics. And whether we're just making comparisons between singular columns, whether we want to get recommendations based off the content of our data in here, we can get a bit more analysis, a bit more insight to our content, to our data, and really start to get it to work for us. So in our case, we can see the comparisons, we can see how they're related between these two data sets and where our potential mismatches might be by simply looking at our heat map here and seeing how similar these different data sets are together based off of their content. So once we've built out our comparisons between our multiple different data sets here, we can now see which are going to be our mismatches, which items are not going to be returned from one side or the other. If we want to take this even further, we can perform fuzzy matching. We can apply conditional statements to all of this. We can compare on columns that we've created to begin with. And once we've gone ahead and created our comparison here, we'll select what columns we simply want returned. And when we hit OK, we've now really identified 5 records inside of that original data set that weren't returned inside of our database or weren't returned inside of the content that we wanted to compare it to. And what we've really, more importantly, in my mind, we've built out a workspace, we've built out an environment in which we can make these comparisons and perform these functions on that repeatable basis. So the next time this data set comes in, we don't want to have to perform that process again. We're really building out that lineage, we're building out that workspace to perform a set of instructions in an intuitive manner and allowing analysts to do this rather than making it, putting a lot of that burden on either data scientist teams or the analyst teams that are really building out the visualization or the business analytics or any other pieces that are downstream from the original inception of that data. And that's what we see recorded on the left side of our screen. So we're giving really those end users the ability to be agile with their data sets while still giving them a governed environment to verify the content that's in here. Now, once we've created this repeatable workspace, what we want to do is maybe compare it to last week's or next week's or every time these things come in. We have that ability by simply removing old reports, by removing the old set of or the old data sources that the set of instructions are being applied to. We can simply introduce new data sets that follow these same patterns for this repeatable fashion. So if we had any other additional or new data sources that we want to apply to it, we can simply drop them inside of our application here as they come in, or even apply a server-assisted tool to give it a set of parameters, to give it a set of time on which to run this process, to go out, find these data sets, extract the data, perform the data cleansing as we see inside of the change history, create our comparisons, and give us our results. Because the faster we can get out of the data cleansing and the data preparation stage, the more we can actually begin to interact and actually work with the content of that data, identify anomalies, identify trends, identify those patterns to make those predictions, to make those prescriptive changes, or to make real change inside of how this process is actually being ran. Because again, we want to be able to open up that aperture to all the different types of data that you have available, not just the ones that are easier to work with, not just the ones that are friendly to the analyst or friendly to the people downstream or friendly into pushing it into a visualization tool, but we want to create that comfortable level in accessing all of your data. And of course, what we're seeing here really isn't that end all be all, because we have flexibility in terms of where that data is coming from. Once we've verified that content, and we can click through each one of these changes, each one of these transformations, and how the data came to its final format, once we've gained that trust in terms of how this process was actually being ran, we can go ahead and export that data set into any one of these other fashions. So whether we're simply pushing it off and keeping it inside of its structured format for historical purposes, or if we're uploading it into another type of database, we have those capabilities, but we also have that ability to integrate with a number of different tools, both internal and external to Altair as a whole, in order to gain a bit more of that insight, identify those trends, and build a number of different complex processes around the simplified or the more efficient process that we've created here. And that's really our end goal for all of this, is that we want to be able to open up the idea of what you're able to do with your data, not see it as that burden, not see it as that challenge that needs to be overcome, but really allow you to leverage the content that you're already using today to reassess how you're performing some of these processes and what you might be able to leverage in the future. So whether you're simply ripping and replacing current processes or you're developing something new, we want to be integrating with wherever you are within that data journey. Because if we go back to one of those original slides that we took a look at, those are one of the things that we want to go ahead and identify. Not just who our users are, not just what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, not just some of these things and how they're interacting with their data, but we might want to go ahead and identify where we are within this process and where our overall goals are and how we can facilitate that. And I would definitely argue, and of course I'm biased in this regard, but the accessing and the preparation and understanding of that data is integral to that step. A lot of people want to jump directly into leveraging their current processes and leveraging what they have already into the analytic portion, into turning that into insights that they might be able to make decisions upon. But without having access to all of your data, it becomes very challenging to not have that entire picture. And I think with our last 10 minutes, we had a couple questions come in. So I think we wanted to field some of these before we let you go for some of the other presentations. So one of the things is that we're asking here is, with a wide range of data sets being utilized primarily from multiple sources, how do you ensure that multiple data sources would be able to work across one another, standardization and centralization? So that's a great question, because it's one of the things that are core to the product itself, and it kind of goes back into that access and that governance piece that we talked about from before. So each one of those data sets that we're leveraging within our processes, the way that I like to go about doing them, and I can even switch back to my screen, is having the ability to really create a palette here to load up all of our data in a singular location. So we would maybe make a singular workspace for a job or a process or one of the things that we might be struggling with that we're performing on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and bring all of our data inside of one platform here. This gives us the ability to go ahead and compare these two together. So if we take it back to one of these initial steps, and again, I have the outline of how we got to this final conclusion built out for me here. And if we compare multiple different data sets together, and I can even duplicate multiple tables so we can see that raw table or that raw data set, we can see that there are discrepancies between these two. We know that they're similar. We know that they relate to each other in some way. But because we're giving you a platform to normalize that data, now you have a better understanding of exactly where those differences are and how you might be able to achieve them. Now, generally, when we're talking about these kinds of things, we need to have an end goal in mind. We need to have an idea of what we're trying to achieve, whether it is for the purpose of a visualization tool, for reconciliation, or simply for further analysis or keeping historic records. And once we have that, we can have kind of the tools in place to go ahead and perform a number of those different cleansing steps. Whether we're performing complex filters, calculated fields, conditional statements, we can go ahead and compare those two together in the same playing field and see what steps we need to perform in order to further normalize that data. Because we're really giving you a wide range of tools to leverage. It's really up to you of how you want to go ahead and apply them and get a reliable output. And generally, again, when we're talking about introducing new processes or new applications into a business unit, what we usually recommend is having something more like a champion or challenger types of workspaces or models. This applies for the data science and the data analytics as well, is that we really give you that playing field or that sandbox to work in. So I can try a number of different things with my data sources simply by duplicating those tables, keeping a same number of changes, keeping that lineage of where they came from, and try a number of different things with them. And we get that feedback, we get that immediate idea of how that data, what the resulting data change is going to look like. And if we don't like it, or if we don't see that there's any benefit to changing or applying that change to that data set, we can simply undo those changes and get back to a more comfortable state of where we were initially, or even trace that data all the way back to its inception of how it's initially coming in. So it is a self-correcting process, and it's also entirely sequential, meaning each step along the way needs to be performed before the next one is. Meaning this data needs to be extracted, pulled in before it gets cleaned up, before it gets transformed, before it even gets compared and joined to any other additional data set. And if we see any ideas of issues or discrepancies, we can always trace it back to its source, make the changes there, and all of those changes will propagate up through. So what we like to mention is we're building out those connections to begin with and really using that as the sandbox to see if the content of what we're pulling that data in matches our expectations for what it should look like. And one of the other questions that came in is just in reference to that repeatability functionality, where, how do we take that from repeatability to automation? Or how do we take it from something that was a little bit still manual of replacing those original files and make it into an automated or a production environment process? And we do that by building out these workspaces here, which really act as the logic. They act as that recipe of exactly how we want to transform and manipulate that data set. And we can promote those into a server environment to build a simple workflow around, where we dictate where this data is coming from, what it generally looks like, and the various different workspaces that we might want to apply to it. Because of course, when we're dealing with one different use case here, they might begin to create additional data sets. So they might create additional ideas of how we can leverage additional sources that we didn't have available from before. And once we do that, we're going to have the ability to analyze any other content that we want to bring in. Through the automated process, we're really allowing the end users to build out a trusted government environment and then allow them to take the hands completely off the wheel and create their outputs and feed their different systems on a consistent and regular basis. That frees up both the analysts and anyone downstream to perform more of the analytics or more of the actual decision making on their data itself. And I think that was all of the questions that we had in the meantime. Oh, in one moment here, I think we just got another one. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, so the question is it possible to use data analytics tools to import raw data directly from application or system if the report are not developed in the system itself? We like to leverage a wide range of those different types of data, regardless of where they're coming from. So whether they're coming from your core system, whether they're coming from proprietary content or even proprietary file extensions, generally there's a way that we can pull that in. Whether we're converting it from one file type to another, generally we want to go ahead and get it into something that we can work with here. But again, once that data is inside of one of these formats from a number of these different database connections, from these PDFs or text or the applications, we want to go ahead and normalize all of that data and give it the same playing field as anything else. And one of the other questions are, which self-service tool are you using to join and prepare the data from an audit perspective? This can help perform a lot of those audit functionalities. So inside of here, whether we're talking about kind of the look of auditing our data from a macro point of view, of understanding different data sets, we can do that here by making the comparisons, doing the joins, combining multiple data sets together to gain the insight as to where our discrepancies are. But also within the tool itself has that audit trail, has that ability to understand exactly what changes are being applied along the way, and also does it in a very clean and an easy to read fashion. So we're not combing through SQL code, or we're not combing through anything from R or Python or anything like that. We have it clearly laid out exactly what changes are being applied, and we can follow that audit trail from beginning to end. So both from the macro point of view of where this data is coming from and how it's being transformed, we can audit that process by checking out our load plan or understanding the data sets themselves. But we can also audit the process of how we came to this final result, or this final conclusion, simply by looking through our load plan or our different changes histories inside of our workspaces, in a way, kind of the self-contained audit process to make sure that the content of the instructions that are going in here are valid, and they're able to flex and change with the variability and the changes in our data sets that come in on a regular basis. So with that, I think those were all of the questions and answers that we had. But of course, if anything else comes up in the meantime, I will be on the panel discussion in about an hour or so. So thank you so much for joining me on such an early and late evening.
Okay. Well, thank you, Harrison. Indeed, it was like a really insightful session for those who are very familiar with lots of numbers. But for me, I got a bit dizzy. Sorry, I had to go and get coffee and come back. Okay, but I can see there's some more questions coming in. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And obviously, if you have any further questions with regards to how in detail kind of questions, please feel free to head to Altair's exhibition booth, which will be open throughout the day for today. So you can ask your questions. I'm sure even Harrison or his colleagues will be there to answer any of your questions. So you can even request for the handouts, and we'll be sharing the recorded session of Harrison with you after this as well. And I guess with this, we will end the session. And thank you so much, Harrison. I know it's really late for you there. Your bed is waiting for you.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to wait a little bit longer, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. And for our attendees, you're going to be redirected to lobby. Yeah, and once you go to the lobby, you can see the next session under Ramanathan. It says enter now. So click on it, enter it, and alternatively, if you want to ask any questions from Altair stuff, please feel free to head over to their booth and just ask them any questions that you have. And thank you very much for tuning in again. See you on the other side. Good night, Harrison.
All right, thanks again, everyone.